So this is a new series I'm going to be doing, why Bitcoin is so special. In this, I'm going to talk about how Bitcoin works, where Bitcoin derives its value from, how Bitcoin is going to move us toward renewable energy, how Bitcoin is the asset of the next decade, and all of the different things that go into that. So, without further ado, let's get into part one. Also, I wanted to make this series geared more toward the people that are least likely to understand Bitcoin. So, people in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, more than 40s, 50s, and 60s, the ones that are around post tech generation. So, without further ado, let's go. Part one. How does Bitcoin work? So, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a decentralized blockchain based open ledger technology created in response to the 2008 financial crisis by an individual or group of individuals by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. So, basically, Satoshi Nakamoto saw the irresponsibility in the traditional banking system during the 2008 financial crisis and created Bitcoin as a result of this because it cannot be there's never more than 21 million Bitcoin, unlike the traditional financial system where every time companies make poor financial decisions, the government can just print more money to bail them out. So, what is blockchain open ledger technology? A ledger that keeps track of all transactions in order. Let's compare Bitcoin to your bank account. So, your bank account keeps track of inflows and outflows of your account and displays the final number at any given time. You and you alone can view it, and you alone can look back and see what was deposited and withdrawn all the way back to when you opened the account. The bank can also see this as well, of course. The bank ledger as a whole shows all the cash. So now we're zooming out from your bank account to the bank ledger. The bank ledger as a whole shows all the cash and credit among all account holders in the bank, including your account, to show what is owned and what is deposited already. So the bank's ledger shows all the accounts in the bank, the amount of money to deposit into each account, what is flown into and what is flown out of the accounts. Now, it's not exactly how the bank ledger works, but for simplicity purposes, let's just pretend the bank ledger only shows the deposits and withdrawals of all the accounts underneath it. And that's the basic understanding of most people, anyways. Now, let's talk about the Bitcoin ledger. The Bitcoin blockchain is essentially the same thing, except instead of cash, it shows what wallet holds what Bitcoin. Unlike the bank, all participants can view the blockchain and see who sent what Bitcoin where and who holds what Bitcoin. So you go back to the bank account or the bank's ledger, shows all the cash and credit in each account. The bank can see that. The Bitcoin ledger shows what wallets hold what Bitcoin and who sent what Bitcoin where, and everyone can see it. Let's talk about Bitcoin addresses now. So this is Satoshi Nakamoto's Genesis Bitcoin address, or you may hear of it referred to as a public key. The public key or address is where others can send you Bitcoin. So this is basically your account number and or your routing number and account number. So this is how you send and receive Bitcoin. It doesn't matter if this is out in the open. It actually should be if you want to send and receive Bitcoin. This is what you're going to need to give people if you want them to send you Bitcoin. Now let's talk about your private key. This is basically your password to your bank account. So this is how you get into your bank account to move that money around. So now your private key is a string of numbers that gives you access to move your Bitcoin. Let's go back to the bank account example. When you log into your account online, you use the password to get in before you can move funds around. Same thing with Bitcoin. The private key is needed to move funds from one address to another. So we have hold on one second. Just needed to make sure I was recording. I already did this once. I don't want to do it again. Recorded the whole thing without actually recording it. So you have your private key right here. That's basically your password. And then you have your public key here. So this is the one that everyone can see. Everyone can see the amount of Bitcoin you've received and sent out. But in order to actually move those Bitcoins around, you need this private key right here. Now, if you lose that private key, you won't be able to send your Bitcoin or move your Bitcoin anywhere. So you want to make sure you don't lose this or show this to anyone else. So now we have our hardware wallets up here. So this is a Treasure and a Ledger. These actually store your private key on here for you. They have a nice user interface on the internet. You don't need to know much about the backdoor stuff behind Bitcoin. I'm going to teach you a little bit about it in order to kind of give you some clarity on how it actually works and what the nuts and bolts kind of are going on in there, without a crazy programming backward. You should be able to understand it a little bit. So next slide. So what is Bitcoin mining? If you heard of Bitcoin, you might have heard of mining and you'd be like, what the heck? What the heck is mining? Bitcoin is on a computer. So Bitcoin mining is the process of utilizing computer power to create or to complete complex mathematical puzzles. Any computing power can join onto the network by running the Bitcoin code and can compete to solve this problem. The overall computing power dedicated to this is referred to as hash rate. So basically all these computers are competing to solve this super hard math problem in order to submit the next block. A block contains all, and what's in these blocks now? Bitcoin, or the miners are mining in order to publish this new block, and each block contains all of the new data, who sent what Bitcoin where for a roughly 10-minute window of time. Blocks are built one after another, hence blockchain. So these go back all the way back to Bitcoin's founding in 2009. All the blocks back there. Each 10-minute window shows what Bitcoin was sent where, and it keeps track of them in a string of blocks. Bitcoin miners are rewarded for this process with Bitcoin block reward and the fees from sending Bitcoin. So each time you send your Bitcoin, you pay a small fee back and forth. These fees are very, very small. So on September 13th, 2021, an anonymous wallet sent $2 billion worth of Bitcoin and paid a 0.0001713 Bitcoin fee equivalent to 78 cents. And this was completed in a matter of minutes. In the traditional financial system, this will take upwards of 5 days to complete a transaction of this size. Never mind the cost of it. So now let's talk about a node. So a node is a little bit different than a miner. A node is a machine that executes Bitcoin's core software and is allowed to participate in the validation of each Bitcoin block. Each node verifies the work of these miners and the block with other nodes in order to reach a consensus. So you have your Bitcoin block. All these miners compete. The miner that wins says, this is the block that I want to submit, all the transactions within it. All of these nodes look and they verify that all of those transactions are accurate, and they say, yes, we're going to publish this block. They reach a consensus, and the block gets published and added to the chain. You can't go back and change these blocks once they've been published either. So it's locked in there forever. All those transactions are out in the open for everyone to see. You can see all the wallets, who holds what Bitcoin is where, is all open to the public. Everyone can see what Bitcoin is where. Full accountability of every single Bitcoin. Now, beauty of these nodes is that unlike mining, where the tech gets, we'll talk about this more in another video, the tech gets almost every 9 months, the tech from the 9 months previous is almost obsolete. Not exactly obsolete, but the new tech is just so much better. Now, the Bitcoin core software, all you need is a couple gigabytes, or a couple, I forget how many gigabytes on your computer, and then the Bitcoin core software. So you can run this on a typical desktop or Mac computer. You do not need much in order to run a node whatsoever. And this, at its core, is what keeps the Bitcoin network so secure, or all of these little individual nodes that any ordinary person can run in order to uphold the Bitcoin core software. This is an example of one right here. Don't trust, verify. That's kind of a thing that people say with Bitcoin. All these nodes are verifying to make sure that there's no nefarious activity going on by the miners, and the incentive structures are set up so that the miners don't even want to undermine the network, because they want that block reward and they want these Bitcoin fees. We'll talk about the attacks in other videos and how Bitcoin is protected from them and what vulnerabilities it may have, and how the probability of it being undermined by these miners is extremely low. So now let's talk about the block reward halving and the 4-year cycle theory. So there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. The block reward from 2013 was 15 to or 50 Bitcoin per block. So what basically happens is that 50 Bitcoin is mined, and this is the Genesis block. It eventually finds its uh, price kind of floor, its stability level here. Then it gets used to the Bitcoin. Everyone gets used to this 50 Bitcoin per block supply, and the Bitcoin kind of finds an equilibrium between supply and demand. Then it halves. So the first halving in 2013, it brought that block reward down from 50 to 25. So what happens here is it creates this big supply shock. Bitcoin price normally tends to spike, go way out of control until it eventually kind of levels off and finds its equilibrium at a much higher price, gets used to this new supply of Bitcoin coming out roughly every 10 minutes. 2016, this happens again. Bitcoin price goes from a bottom of roughly $270 all the way up around here to 20 or $18,000, $20,000, somewhere in that range. 2020 gets used to that supply again, comes down, crashes here a little bit, gets used to that new 12.5 Bitcoin per block supply. Then in 2020, next halving comes up, 6.25 Bitcoin, leads to this giant run up where we reached around $68,000, $69,000. Now it's eventually going to come down here, level off, get used to that new supply and demand equilibrium. The next halving will be in 2024, where that block reward gets cut from 6.25 down to 3.125. Eventually, 2032, 99% of the Bitcoin will already be mined, and the block reward will only be 0.78125 Bitcoin. Now, you may say, why would people still be mining Bitcoin at that point? And it's, well, the network at that point will most likely be much bigger, and so the fees will contribute a lot more to the actual reward for these miners. Also, the Bitcoin price, if it appreciates the way it has been, should be much, much higher. So even though it's 0.78 Bitcoin, that 0.78 Bitcoin will be worth a lot more than this 50 Bitcoin was back in 2013. This is the basic 1,000-foot overview of Bitcoin. At its core, there will only ever be 21 million of them. The miners uphold the network with these nodes in order to keep it secure. We'll talk about some other things in other videos. I was going to originally make this a whole long PowerPoint about Bitcoin start to finish, but I think it'll be easier if I break it up into these little chunks, section it off little by little. So that's all for this video. I will see you guys in the next one.